Hi, it's Dr. Beddinghouse here on this beautiful Friday afternoon, and I'm so happy to have with us as our special guest today, Laura Glaves. Now, I've known Laura for quite a while. She has served many different areas in medicine as a registered nurse for over 30 years before she began exploring the healing power of poetry. She's also a gifted painter that I discovered after visiting her home one day, and she has some beautiful works that she's created on canvas. I found Laura to be a very gentle, caring person, and she's going to share some of her poems with us today that have been published in several poetry journals. So let's welcome Laura right now. All right.
Thank you, Wanda.
How are you?
Great, I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. I always start with an interview of asking someone how they got started in their more creative endeavors. So if you just want to share a little bit about your journey, how you got inspired in writing, etc., and then what you did after that, okay?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I was born and raised in a small city in central Illinois. And as a child, I loved to draw. But it wasn't until seventh grade that my public junior high school offered an art class. And during that art class, I had 2 semesters of basically learning how to draw. My biggest accomplishment during that is I learned to draw portraits of people. And I used to pose my 2 little nephews on the end of our picnic table in the backyard and draw their portraits. On the last day of that class in seventh grade, I asked Mr. Curtis, could we do painting class next? And he didn't say anything. I took that as a no. I don't think it was in the budget. And so I went on and focused on the sciences in high school. My older sister was a registered nurse, and I did like to help people. I enjoyed science. And so I moved to Denver um, and pursued a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and graduated in 1987. However, after graduation, Denver being a bigger city, I noticed we had the Colorado Free University, and there were many art classes available there. And so I took several oil painting classes with the Colorado Free University. And one day, while driving to my occupational health job in central Denver, I noticed a group of students walking with these large portfolios, and they were walking to their classes at the Colorado Institute of Art. And I was a little envious. I thought, one day, I'm going to do something like that. And that day came in 2003. I'd been a nurse for 16 years and probably 6 or 7 specialties under my belt. And I was a little burned out. And yet, what was I going to do with my time if I quit my job? And I talked to my husband and I decided I would go to art school. And I went to Metro State College of Denver and I earned a BFA in photography, but took many electives in drawing and painting. And I showed my drawings, paintings, and photographs in galleries in the Denver area, mainly in juried shows. So that was awesome. But during this time, my mother's health was deteriorating, and I was going over to her home and helping her. She had 14 medications. She was trying to figure out and juggle and fill the pill boxes, and I was helping her with that. Her memory was diminishing. I would call her every day to remind her to take her pills. And it just got me thinking, I think I'm not finished with nursing yet. So I went to Red Rocks and took a refresher course for RNs, and I went to work for the Denver Hospice as a visiting nurse for the palliative care patients. So these patients are very, very sick. It was highly rewarding. However, I did that for almost 5 years, and I developed unrelenting back pain, and I couldn't get a handle on it. And I decided to retire in June of 2015. And the day that I came home from my last day of work, I said to myself, what am I going to do now? I've fulfilled that part of me in the visual art, but what about creative writing? I think that's gonna be my next thing.
Mhm.
And then I didn't do it. I became a prayer chaplain for the Unity on the Avenue Spiritual Center, and I entered a one-year training program to become a docent at the Denver Art Museum. So I would not write poetry for another 4 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, how would you say the events in your life shaped your writing and poetry? You've already told us a bit about that, but you want to share a little bit more?
Yes, yes. So, um, my I visited my mother a great deal. It was a very difficult journey. She, had a stroke 1 year into my palliative care work, and, I visited her in the nursing home frequently and helped with her care, facilitated, better care with the CNAs and nurses, and, um, at one point, she did pass away in 2018, so 5 years after the stroke.
Mm.
In 2019, I had a friend named Pat who suggested I listen to Hay House Radio. Hay House produces a lot of spiritual authors, who have healing messages,
Yeah.
and I listened to Sonia Choquette one day, and Sonia is an intuitive who's written many books, one of which was called Trust Your Vibes, and I admired her work, and one day I called her,
Mm.
and her intuition told her that I should be writing. And I said, funny you say that, I did make that declaration on my last day of nursing and didn't do it, other than I keep a journal.
Mm.
And she said, "Well, I don't know what you'll be writing, but just put pen to paper every day and see what happens." And I started to write memoir, and it felt forced. It didn't feel authentic. I didn't enjoy it. That's when my husband stepped in and said, "I think you should look at the OLLI classes." And I said, "Well, what's OLLI?" It's Ochsner Lifelong Learning Institute,
Yeah.
and they offer classes through DU for people 50 and older and on a wide variety of subjects. So I looked down the list of classes to find a writing class, and I found one by Donna Denome. She's actually a prayer practitioner at the Mile High Church.
Done.
She's a life coach. She's an author of many books, one of which is called As You Feel, So You Heal.
Yeah.
And she offered writing prompts during her class and would set a timer for just 2, 3 minutes, real quick. And you just pen to paper, don't edit it, and pour out your heart onto the pages. Well, one day she read a poem called Let Me. And that's the first time she had done that, wrote a poem as the prompt. And the words "let me" really it kinda stuck with me because I was thinking about how much I missed my mom, my dad, my brother, my nephew. I've had many, many losses in my life, and I just thought, "Oh, I would love to reunite with them in spirit, but not die." Yeah, and so this is the first poem I ever wrote.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna read it to you.
Okay, please.
Let me dissolve into a puddle of water on the old wooden floor. Then, drop by drop, let me evaporate into the invisible realm, that sacred place for the unseen. Let me rise to the ethers and find all those I have ever loved. Let us blend together and rain down on those bound by earth. Let them feel our warm, moist droplets on their upturned cheeks, and let our rain and their tears recognize each other and commingle as one.
Mm. Yeah.
This poem is now published in an anthology called Hysteria 8, and it's available on Amazon.
Wow.
It's cool. And I didn't know I knew how to write poetry. This poem kind of shocked me that this came from me in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
As a prompt, I had not had any poetry training in high school or college. And so I thought, "Oh my gosh, there's something inside of me that knows how to do this, but I would prefer to have formal training." So I went back to the OLLI list of classes for the following semester, and guess what I found? A gentleman named Art Elsner who was teaching a poetry class, and he was a former university professor. So what an opportunity. And so I had I had an assignment every week with him for 8 weeks. This next poem I wrote about is a very a poignant moment of visiting my mom after she had had her stroke. It was a clot on the left side of her brain, so she wasn't able to speak very well. And in the evening, she was so tired she didn't speak at all. So this poem is titled In the Silence. I slip inside Mom's room early one evening and find her awake in bed. In the dim light, I sit next to her, just behind the bed rail. Her brown eyes shine brightly. She smiles that lopsided grin, lifting the left corner of her lips. I bend down and kiss her cheek. She wrestles her left hand from beneath the blankets. Her fingertips trace my forehead, then fall to my temple. And tenderly, she strokes the contours of my cheek. Never lifting her hand, she caresses the curve of my chin over and over again. Then she lifts her left hand and strokes my silky hair from the crown of my head to the nape of my neck over and over again. In the silence, her message is clear. I love you, I love you, I love you, over and over again. That's the nonverbal communication is so powerful, and that's what I learned. Is her essence was still in her body, even though the brain had suffered a great trauma, and her communication was clear. I felt very loved, and she had never touched me like that before when she was fully healthy.
You know, it's like the soul. The soul isn't still there and cognizant to express love for you.
Yeah, yeah. That was that poem was published in, let's see. Oh, it was in an adult children anthology published last month by Wising Up Press. So, no, let's see. universaltable.org, a Wising Up anthology about adult children, what it's like to be an adult child. Okay, my next poem was a particular instruction by Art Elsner. He was challenging us a little further, and he said, I want you to write a poem where you go back and forth in time from the past to the present, past to the present. And I had a week to come up with something. And I had been having a recurring memory while being unable to sleep. So I thought, this is what I have to write about. This poem is titled Gone. I lay in bed unable to sleep, feeling lost and bereft. A childhood memory plays over and over in my mind. I'm 5 years old in a motel room with mom and dad. I lie in bed and touch the nubby texture of my teddy bear Ted. I stare at the coarse black threads crisscrossing his back, a gaping wound mom has closed. We wake early the next morning and pile into the car. Miles down the road, I realize Ted is gone. He must be at the bottom of your bed, Mom says. The maid will find him and give him to her little girl. I toss and turn, touching Ted's texture in my thoughts. My wound grows wider. I yearn for comfort. Mom is gone.
All right. That's quite brilliant. I'm closing my eyes as you read them so that I can really get into it. And hopefully the people that are listening or who will listen to this later, that let the poems just sweep over you and bring forth your own imagery and your own poem.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. This was the first poem I ever got published
Really?
by Open Door Poetry magazine. It's a digital magazine that was published last June.
Mm.
Yeah. Let's see. I remember when my mom was dying, I talked to the social worker with Denver Hospice, and I said to him, this feels so primal. This feels different than my loss of my brother or my father or nephew. This is different. And after she died, I received a lot of cards from fellow docents at the Denver Art Museum, and they said, this is a tough one, losing your mother. And so I wrote this poem titled Raw and Primal about that relationship between a mother and a child and why this is so difficult.
Yeah.
Raw and primal. I floated in the dark, warm water, then twisted and turned to the sound of your beating heart, its rhythm a constant comfort. I eavesdropped on muffled murmurs and understood the medley of your moods. When I emerged from your body, red and raw, I gasped for air and wailed. My bleary eyes turned towards your voice. I found your face. Our eyes met, brown to blue. We are two, but still one, in that raw and primal place.
Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't obviously remember being a fetus or a newborn, but I think there's a part of my body or soul that does remember because I do feel a oneness to her.
Yeah, I think we do know it. It's like we may not be able to call it to conscious mind, but yeah, even people who've had hypnosis can go back to their birth experience. It's pretty amazing and pretty accurate too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I hadn't thought about that with hypnosis. Yeah. So I finished arts class, but before I did, I gathered a group of people who want to form a writing critique group with me. And so we continue to meet every month on Zoom and critique each other's poems. And I continued to write about my grief, and I wanted to share the next 5 short poems with you all, just to highlight some of the stages of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is titled Death. Death strikes like an earthquake, cracking foundations, collapsing brick, mortar, and glass. Inhabitants are left shaking in its wake if they survive at all. Connection and belonging fracture and crumble into pieces too small to see. Life splits into 2, before and after, each unrecognizable to the other. An arm reaches through the rubble, grasping for a stronghold, something secure and stable, normal even. What I felt while writing this one is the destruction of the family structure, routine, and rituals that were so familiar before. And I use the metaphor of an earthquake. It's just, it turned everything on its head.
Yeah.
And we're grasping for creating a new normal. Yeah. And I wrote that from a place of anger, despair, resentment, that I have to change, that this is a part of the life experience. They have to go through this, and it's. And in the weeks after my mom's passing, I went to kind of the next stage of grief, which is more that shock and numbness. And I remember even when she was dying, there were times my fingertips felt numb.
Yeah.
And numbness is meant when I wrote this next poem, it's more about a mental numbness of just being in a fog and not being able to think very clearly, not having my higher cognitive powers the way they used to be, and you know. And so this one's titled "Sitting in the Fog." Fighting the fog is futile, so I let it engulf me. Its cool mist carries me to that numb place where I can breathe a little easier. The clamor of the outside world grows muffled. Chatter turns to whispers. I sit still in my fog and remember you.
Fog. Yeah. It's a protective mechanism. All these stages are protective mechanisms so that we can stay with it and be with it as the healing takes place.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it changes us too.
Yeah. It's temporary, but yeah.
It changes us.
Yeah. This one was just recently published this month in the Fieldstone Review under an anthology titled Escapism.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that they chose this for their literary journal in Canada for their Escapism book. Okay. The next one I was inspired to write one evening. My husband likes to go to bed early, like at 9 o'clock, and he left, and I was standing in the dining room, and I actually felt like there were parts of my torso that were hollow, or I called them vacant spaces, and it was a tangible feeling of emptiness. And I thought, well, this is good food for a poem. I got out my paper and pen, and this is what I wrote. Vacant spaces. In the quiet of the evening, I see them loud and clear, those vacant spaces moaning while standing at the mirror. It's as if I'm a puzzle, unfinished somehow, with those few pesky pieces unable to be found. In the daylight, you would think, I surely have it all, but in the stillness of the night, you would hear their haunting call.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read all the poems you sent me.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. They're how can you ever call anything just good? They're evocative. So
Oh, thank you. I was surprised how hollowness can feel tangible at times. Sometimes the stages of grief are like the numbness. It was tangible. Like, wow, feelings are powerful. It's energy moving through us. And
absolutely.
yeah. Well, my next one, I was just determined to stop being so burdened by being a midlife adult is grieving. And I wrote a poem about play, and it's called Excavate That Little Girl.
Oh, okay.
You're doing just fine. There's no need to worry that you're not good enough. Light a match to your critiques and watch them burn.
Mm-hmm.
Shed your adult pretenses and play. Jump rope, throw rocks, blow bubbles, and watch them float to nowhere in particular. Excavate that little girl, the one with the easy laugh. She still exists beneath the layers of time. Sing as she did at the top of your lungs without worry that you're off key. Braid daffodils and daisies into a crown and strut upon the stage like a queen.
Excavate that child. Oh, yeah.
She's still there beneath the layers of time.
Absolutely.
And I did have an easy laugh. I had quite an infectious giggle as a little girl. I giggled all the time.
You still have an infectious laugh. A beautiful smile.
This was published in an anthology titled Play by the Outrider Press Tallgrass Writers Guild in just this month. Mm-hmm. And the last poem I'm going to read for you is about my healing, and I just wrote it in December. So it's very, very recent. And it's called I Don't Know When It Happened. I don't know when it happened, when my tears turned to laughter, when my sorrow turned to joy. Maybe it was when my girlfriends giggled and gossiped like yours used to do. Or maybe it was when I found that perfect sweater while sifting through thrift stores like we used to do. No, I think it was when I took that big bite from an oh so sweet sugar cookie without a care about calories the way you used to do. And again, it may have been the moment I noticed your brown eyes meeting mine in the mirror, the shape, the color, so similar to yours.
Coming home.
Yeah. Yeah, I catch myself doing the things mom used to do, and I look in the mirror and I see our resemblance. It's almost like her eyes are looking back at me. They're my eyes. And it's a comfort.
Yes.
It's a comfort that she's still here.
I have certainly had that experience with my mother. And the older I get, the more I look like her. And it's like, I'm not alone anymore, Mom. You're still here.
Yeah.
Right within me. And it's amazing. Even my body shape is like hers. And she had a perpetual smile. And I don't know that I have a perpetual smile, but I can feel that joy in her and softness and kindness. So that's just beautiful. Do you have any more you want to share?
No, that's
Lori, I started writing. I had forgotten that I started writing poems when I was in a resident in pediatrics in Dallas, Texas, a few years ago, and I have all my things. I think I have almost everything I've ever written, and they were simple at the beginning, but they evolved. And then in 1996, I did Julie Cameron's The Artist Way, and I started writing every day journals. I have probably 50 journals uh, of just writing morning pages, and out of those would come poetry periodically. And then I started getting a little bit more involved in writing. Just taking my book out. I used to just put them everywhere, but then I thought I'm never going to find them. So I just got a journal, and this is my poetry journal. And I can't just make myself do it. I've got to do it when I'm either inspired profoundly by beauty or something or an emotion, or when I'm really sad or something has really disturbed my soul. Uh, it's so poetry has always been a part of my life, and I try to bring that forth to the people that are in this group who are interested in healing. They want to know how they can help their body and their mind and their soul and the spirit heal in a natural way. So, you know, I've interviewed Brian Leatherman about the healing power of music, and John Fox, who is the founder of the Institute of Poetic Medicine. And people say, well, aren't you going to talk about vitamins and minerals and lab tests? Yeah, I'll do that too. But this is part of life, okay? And I'm just so grateful that you decided to come on board with me for a little while today. So, you know, um, what do you think is the purpose of poetry in our lives?
mm. Well, to write it, it's definitely self-expression,
Mhm.
and to read it, maybe to resonate with another writer's experiences, and to realize that we're all so connected to each other. We're all one at a soul level. For me, it was going through the stages of grief and expounding on them, writing. And I, like you, I don't write poetry every day. It's when something inspires me, and when I have deep emotion, um, that was the easiest prompt to
Yeah.
write a poem.
I have written so many poems in my mind.
Hmm.
I'll just be out walking, and I'll just start a rhythmic speaking. And they're probably the best poems I've ever written, but they're gone, captured by the wind. But yeah, it's just an amazing thing. And do you encourage people to write poetry? Are
I
you're a teacher too? I can
yeah,
tell.
I love to teach.
Yeah.
I encourage my clients and patients to do free writing.
Yeah.
And so take a pen to paper and just write, kind of like the morning pages that Julia Cameron recommended.
Mhm.
And it's taking that energy of the emotion and putting it on the page and getting those feelings out of your body and onto the paper. And so that's going to be healing to get it out. And what I have found has been being a daily journaler since I was 19 years old, um, that I would develop insights with the free writing of things I would not have realized they were in my unconscious mind. And through writing, I would find some resolution to my own problems. Just letting the pen go.
Yeah. Many of my morning pages are questions that are within me that eventually I come to an understanding, and not necessarily an answer, but an understanding of what the question was about. And many times I have written, they're like prayers, and I'm just talking to God,
Mhm.
writing out all the things that are in the world that are troublesome and praying for healing for people. It's just a wonderful way. If people would really take the time to do it, I think it would change their lives. Um, is there anything else that you want to share with us before we see if there's anybody who's asked questions?
A couple of things. One, when I described my journey for being the little girl that liked to draw, that had got one glass in the seventh grade, and then another, is that a calling doesn't leave you alone. If you're really called to do something, like for me, it was visual arts and then the creative writing, the teacher shows up. This when the student is ready, the teacher shows up as a common expression. And that's true, and a calling doesn't leave you alone. So years may pass, and I would encourage listeners to heed their inner callings and trust the universe that the right teachers will come along. Every teacher that I had in the um, Ali format only taught once, and then they resigned from teaching again, some temporarily and one permanently. Um, and so I'm so glad I heeded the call when Jeff, my husband, prompted me. I think you should take the class. That I did. That I did. And otherwise, I wouldn't be with you today.
Yeah, I remember we talked about me interviewing you quite a while ago, and it was just then finally the right time. So,
Mhm.
if people want to reach out to you, Tom, can you put her email address in the comment box? Yeah, here we go. Is there is there you mentioned all the anthologies and poetry journals, et cetera, that your poems are published in. Would you like for us to put that in the comment box too? I mean, we can do that later, but
We could do it later, sure. Because
okay.
this will be posted to Facebook and YouTube, and it'll be written. Sure.
Yeah, it's immediately on Facebook and YouTube. So, gosh, this has been wonderful. Yeah, I realize that I could just go on and on and on. And you've graced us. Thank you so very, very much. And I look forward to maybe doing this again. Maybe we should do it with your paintings because you've got some pretty amazing paintings. And of course, you and Jeff now traveling a lot, taking beautiful photos around the world and posting those on Facebook. So those are cool.
It's fun. Well, thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for having me. This has been an honor to be on your show, and my hope was that maybe some of my poems made people who are grieving feel less alone.
I'm sure that it will touch many people. They may not have been able to join us at this time, but let me see. Somebody else made a comment. I so enjoyed this. So great to hear the number of poems that Laura has had published. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, my dear. Well, I will probably see you soon for
Okay.
game night.
Yeah, for game night.
Okay. All right. Thank you and so much.
Thank you.